everybody, how's it going? Dan Schinder here.
And Steven Schinder here.
And we're here to celebrate with you 50 years of the album Close to the Edge. 50 years of this music that was ahead of its time when it came out, and I still feel like it's ahead of its time 50 years later. Steven, why don't you give some context of what was going on in the music scene when this came out while I slide my camera over?
Right, so Close to the Edge was recorded by Yes from February to June 1972 and then released September 13th of that year. And we're, of course, doing this a few days early because of our schedules and whatnot.
We're busy!
Yeah. But... yeah, so that year, so within that year, King Crimson released Islands in December of 1971. We'll be mentioning them again later on, for sure. Jethro Tull released Thick as a Brick in March of 72. Gentle Giant released Three Friends in April, and they'd release Octopus in December, which is another one with a Roger Dean cover art type of thing. Uriah Heep released Demons and Wizards in May and would release The Magician's Birthday in November, and both of those also have Roger Dean art, funny enough.
Interesting. And there's something real interesting about that I just thought of, but continue, please.
Yeah, and Pink Floyd released Obscured by Clouds, and I think this was around when they were starting to record Dark Side of the Moon, which, you know, another iconic prog rock album. Emerson, Lake and Palmer
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, Emerson, Lake and Palmer released Trilogy in July, and Genesis had released Nursery Crime in November of 71 and would release Foxtrot in October of 72, so a month after Close to the Edge. So what do you think of all this context?
First of all, music... popular music in unpopular music, depending on how you look at it, was so different back then. But the first thing that grabs me about all this is bands cranking out not just music, but incredible music, more than one album a year. Or like in Pink Floyd's case, releasing something and they're already working on the next one. In at least two other cases, you know, 2 albums in 1 year. It just doesn't happen now. It's amazing to me. And I find it very interesting that Roger Dean was very busy that year doing work for, other album projects. And it's the Yes cover that, and mine is very old, not well taken care of. Sorry, folks. But the one that's the most blank on the front, and the back has some studio shots and everything. We'll talk more about the cover later. So I find that interesting. All of that.
Yeah.
I mean, just that 1 year of music, which is that handful of bands. You could have that as your library or that loaded into your, automobile's CD carousel, and you're good for a nice long trip, just with amazing brain expanding music with just that.
Yeah, and I also pulled out my LP of Close to the Edge, which I'm pretty sure my brother Alex got for me several years ago, along with some other Yes albums.
You have a brother?
Yeah, so it's kind of the...
Oh gosh, so much better shape. Yeah, I don't even want to get into the why, but...
like the interior with the
oh wow, mine's different.
Water. Oh,
no,
it is?
I'm kidding.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I gotcha. But I love how the light is shining off yours and everything. Yeah, the disc is in really great shape.
Yeah, I also realized that I forgot that I also have like a Going for the One LP and a few other things. So like,
wait, question real quick for the Close to the Edge. Do you have the sleeve that's green with the lyrics all over it?
No, I don't.
Wait a minute. Like this? Which side opens here? Yours doesn't have this?
I don't think so. I was just gonna really quickly show like the inside of going for the one, and that whole like
Oh, okay.
water thing, just like similar theme, like having water, but
Yeah, that's right.
Let me take a look again. Just
Yeah, how do you not know?
I mean, it's been a while since I looked at this. Oh wait, actually. Oh, okay. So it does have. Okay, the disc is in this. Yeah.
Okay, good. I've always loved the script. As difficult as it is to read, it's just so fitting for the rest of the album and the artwork and all that stuff.
Yeah, I really like how it looks. Yeah, it's been forever since I looked at this, and I was like so cautious about not wanting anything to happen to the disc,
Yeah.
But I also have my CD copy from, this is a 2003 remastered re-release, so it's got like the little sleeve thing, it's got that.
Yeah.
And I actually got this one autographed by Rick Wakeman 5 years ago at the Camberley show in England.
That's great. Did
Yeah,
he say anything about it when because I know often artists will comment on something from years ago when they get to sign it. Did Rick say anything?
I think we talked about other stuff when he was signing it, but I remember during that show, he told a little anecdote of a time when he asked Jon Anderson what Siberian Khatru meant, or maybe someone else asked, but in any case, Jon, like he did a Jon impression, and he was like, I don't know. And it was just like really funny.
I mentioned that during the Drum Talk TV special we did earlier today. In case you folks don't know, I played all 3 songs, and I mentioned when I got to Siberian Khatru, like, what are those lyrics? Gold stainless nail torn through the distance of man. Like, what mushroom dealer did you get connected with, John? That is just so off the wall. But he used his lyrics, as we all know, the Yes fans that know this, that John used lyrics as an instrument. They were notes, they were melodies, syllables that became sounds, and the story isn't necessarily literally a coherent story, if you will, and you can make of it what you want, which I think is great, just like an abstract painting.
Right, and in a little bit we'll get into like what's been said about like some pieces that kind of bring a bit more context to the Close to the Edge song and what some of it is about. But just real quick, I want to give shout outs to a couple people who have commented over on Yesshift. Eli Golden says, hello, Dan and Steven. And Dave Watkinson says, hi, a late night in England.
Nice. Thanks, Dave, for staying up and tuning in. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm just like scrolling through in case anyone
and Dave, if you guys are doing a special on this as well, send us the link and we'll be happy to post it.
What, you mean Kevin and Mark from Yes Music podcast? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Dave guests on that.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Right. I also see that Mika Bice says yo, so hello there.
Yo.
Yeah, so just getting back to the notes. So do we want to talk about, so I found this article from Prog magazine. Well, they posted it on the website laddersound.com about a month or so ago, and it talks about some of the context for Close. It's titled The Story Behind the Song Yes is Close to the Edge. So
Yeah, dive into that.
All right, so just scrolling through this.
Like in real life, I look so short next to you, even online.
Okay. So, I mean, we've previously mentioned how some of the inspiration was from John reading Siddhartha and listening to Sibelius and Sonic Seasonings and that type of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just looking at where this one place I saw is. Okay, you mentioned Sibelius and crazy solo sections. Okay, so there's a quote from Steve Howe where he says, you tend to have plenty of ideas and sketches which don't necessarily have a home, so you pitch them in. John and I worked like that all the time. one of my songs had the line "close to the edge, down by a river," which actually referred to where I was living at the time, next to the Thames. And then there's a quote from Jon saying, "The river leads you to the ocean, all the paths lead you to the divine." So the idea was that as human beings, we are close to the edge of realization. So he was kind of trying to connect that to like the symbolism from that book, Siddhartha. And it's a neat thing how, Steve and Jon had like this huge collaboration like throughout all this, and it's like taking one thing that means something and making it mean another, and I think that's really cool. This article also says that other earlier Howe songs were thrown into the mix. In Total Master Tane, a descending guitar line had previously existed as part of black leather gloves in Howe's pre-Yes outfit Bodast. In the following movement, I Get Up, I Get Down, Howe's In Her White Lace melody was originally a humble enough love song. And Jon also goes into how the 2 million people barely satisfied part is like, thinking about some of the unfortunate starvation that people in other countries, like in Africa, would go through. And like that, like listening to that, like that makes sense, because it's like some people have it good and some people don't. And so it's like this get up, get down type of thing.
The imbalance.
Yeah. So
interesting. I never heard any of that or saw it.
Yeah. And so I feel like everyone listening probably already knows like the track list. Like we have Close to the Edge, And You and I, Siberian Khatru. And You and I, Jon would reference as a protest song, like that's what he'd call it on the Close to the Edge tour. And
it's funny because I've always looked at it as a love song.
Oh yeah, well there is. I was just getting to that. There is actually, apparently there's like a newspaper article during the tour where the person who wrote that article was like paraphrasing Jon and saying that he called And You and I a tale of the search for truth and purity between two people. So I guess it's both. Like maybe it talks about love between people, but also like a universal love. And, just that's the opposite of, this is what I'm saying. Like that's the opposite of like so much fighting and whatnot. It's like I could see how he might see it as a protest song,
Yeah.
And Siberian Khatru, of course, like is a bit more difficult to interpret, but something I was realizing earlier is that when he sings the word glider, I immediately think of the glider that's like on the Fragile album cover. So I don't know, maybe if that had been on Fragile, that would have been my answer to like what song fits the artwork the best, possibly.
Interesting.
Yeah, and of course there are lots of demos and like studio run-throughs that people can find on YouTube, like on the Yes Source YouTube channel, which has a lot of rarities. But of course they also put the early version, like an alternate version of And You and I and a run-through of Siberian Khatru on this expanded CD that I have. So you get weird things like the coming quickly to terms of all expression, like that part was like put at the end of And You and I on this alternate version, so it ends differently. And there's a moment where Jon's like earlier in the song he's like And You and I, and on Siberian Khatru when they say like the weird like words or phrases toward the end, it's pretty similar like for maybe the first half, and then it changes to like some even more like words that aren't what we're used to, so it feels even more odd because it's different. But
it's interesting because sometimes those studio run-throughs, it's either one way or the other. It's either like, oh wow, yeah, that's like almost the song, okay, and then there's some, like I think it was Wakeman, I heard and I thought, how did they ever get to what ended up on the album from this run through, right? It's like so different and off the wall.
I think the most, like the starkest contrast that I've ever heard is I think on that same YouTube channel I mentioned, there's like an Endless Dream demo or run through or something. And it just felt, I vaguely remember it was like so unlistenable and not as close to the song as I would prefer it to be. And it's
That's
like,
so
wow,
funny.
I can see why this hasn't been on some sort of rarities box set or something, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Cool.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, let's talk about like there's some really interesting anecdotes about what was going on in the studio in this book called Close to the Edge, the Book of Yes. I have a physical copy, which I think is like still at your place, but I pulled it up on Google Books for convenience. Like they have like
It is. I should have grabbed it. It's in our library.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
It was easier for me to find it this way. Like they have like the preview.
But I was going to ask. I just want to make sure. Is it still yours?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll buy it and send yours back. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So apparently, so Rick says that the loop tape for Close to the Edge must have been 40 feet long. It went all around the room and just to get all the birds and things you hear at the beginning. And he talks a bit how like technology is different now.
A little bit.
Yeah, and these quotes are from like the late 90s when this book originally came out. But the author Chris Welch mentions how he visited the studio when they were recording it, and he says there were outbursts of anarchy that came not only from the drummer, but from Rick Wakeman and even Steve Howe.
The drummer.
Yeah. And he says he thought it was like high spirits, but there were like there was like a bit of like push and shove, like a tug of war type of thing within the band and stuff. He does credit that Eddie Offord was basically an official member of the band and doing like all these tasks, like helping them with the tapes and edits and mixing everything. He says it's a Herculean task, so that's a nice compliment right there.
Yeah, especially with that music and the technology or lack of at the time.
Yeah, so Chris Welch said that this was pretty much, it seemed like John and Steve were the only ones who really knew what Close to the Edge, the album, was all about. And Chris and Eddie could pull it into shape, while Rick and Bill seemed more like innocent bystanders. And he says how like Bill would be playing with a mountain of paper cups, hammering a precious hand-carved harpsichord, and loudly announcing his ultimate aim of blowing up the studio. And
well, he does say in I think the Yes Years, film, he says how they would spend half an hour or an hour discussing whether a note should be a F or F sharp, stuff like that. That would drive me crazy. I could not be in a band like that. So I get it. And it's not a drummer thing either. It's more of a personality trait and a tolerance or lack of patience for certain things. I just couldn't do that these days.
yeah, and apparently Rick mixed soup and chocolate together and would offer it to unknowing like visitors or something. It's just it's so odd, but it sounds so on brand for him,
And the only one that probably wasn't doing any drugs at the time too. I don't know about the others, but I know he wasn't, and that's funny. And that's funny if you even think of the music and recognize that. And if you think of Wakeman's whole library, it's funny that people just assume, wow, what were they on? He wasn't on anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like me when I tell certain jokes that people feel like are out of nowhere. They'll ask me if I'm high on something, and I'm like, no, this is just me.
And that's true.
Yeah.
I'm high when they ask me that, by the way.
Oh, here's a part where apparently Bill had asked, what does total mass retain mean? And John was like, what's wrong with total mass retain? And he explains how like John explains, I had to think of something quickly, and the name of the piece was only chosen after some argument, and at the time Chris Welch misheard the title, which he thought was Total Mass Return. And apparently back then Bill suggested, why not call it Puke?
Bill's so analytical. I could see how he would ask that question. He wants to know, what am I playing to? What is this song we're creating? What's the story? How's it going to resonate with people? Who's it going to resonate with? And you can only answer that if you know what the song's about. It's a legitimate question. Siberian Khatru must have driven him nuts.
Yeah, and I mean, for Close to the Edge, like according to this, for a while they weren't sure how the song ends, and so there was like I'm sure a lot of stress and frustration trying to figure the whole thing out.
Well, you know what I love about this, that all of this, the laborious process that drove him nuts to leave the band, he decided to go do something much easier. Go work with Robert Fripp and the guys at King Crimson, a cush gig compared to this. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, so I guess we could go into Bill's departure then.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked before, I think when we reviewed his autobiography, how...
and when we had him on.
Yeah, we interviewed him as well. He had to pay a fee to ensure his departure from the band. And you get a sense from this book, the Chris Welch book, that at the time he was like sort of not that happy with it. But I guess over time he might be fine with it. Because in the same book, he also says a 50-50 might be fair. Like, I worked on the album and Alan spent a lot of time playing it like all over the place and even in stadiums.
Which helped sell it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a really good point, because the tour began like almost 2 months before the album came out, maybe a month and a half before the album came out, which
right. And Alan,
is pretty weird to think about.
It is. And not only that, in all fairness, Alan joined 3 days before the tour, had to not only learn the music, but the show. And Bill doesn't have really any writing credits other than that one, bit. So it's not like the split, like, why am I giving this guy 50% if he didn't write anything and I wrote everything? It's like, that's almost not that much of a factor. So I think he was very magnanimous to go along with that. I don't know whose idea that part of it was, but he also said...
I mean, Brian Lane orchestrated some of that, is like damage fee type of thing.
Yeah. And
yeah, it wasn't 50% for nothing though,
And he wasn't I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, he said that he wouldn't leave until they found a replacement. He guaranteed that, which was cool.
Yeah, and real quickly, I see another comment from Harry Whitley, who says greetings from Wales.
Nice.
Yeah, glad people over in that time zone are staying up and watching / listening.
Yeah, great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let us know, folks, what you think of that. In fact, Steve and I are going to go back and forth right now on a bunch of questions for each other. Yeah. And we'd like you to chime in with those questions as well, with your answers to those questions. So let it rip, Steven.
Right. So what are your memories of this album, Dad? Like acquiring it and listening to it for the first time?
Huge. So to give it context, this ancient album I got when I was 13. So that would have been 76.
Yeah.
So that would have been 4 years after it came out. And here's the kicker. I remember where I was, too, when I got it. It was a store that's no longer around. That was a big department store, like a Target type of store called Gemco. And I got it with Yes songs. But my whole life, I've always listened to live stuff first. Even though I bought them at the same time, I listen. Now imagine this, folks, if you're familiar with both those albums. I listened to Yes songs first, and the difference in the compositions and how they were performed live versus what's on here. Not only that, but the sonic soundscape production of this album versus how it was presented live. They were two completely different experiences. So I heard the live stuff first. Then when I put this on, I'd never heard a recording of music that sounded like that, let alone the music. And at that time, I had been playing drums almost 7 years already and was fairly advanced. So it just blew my mind. And one of the things I really loved about the album was I've always been a behind the scenes guy. I loved the pictures on the back. And it always, and still as I see it, kind of bothers me that the picture of Rick was a live shot and not from the studio. Like it's so incongruent with everything else there. It drives me nuts, you know?
Yeah, I never thought of that.
Yeah, like what's up with that? There were no pictures of Rick from the session. But just, I know there's other questions that will probably tie into more discussion, so I'll leave it at that. Huge impression musically. Just took my brain away on a journey, and it still does today. 50 years after it came out, which would be 46 years after I got it.
Yeah. So for me, and real quick, I'll just say Bob Bailey commented saying, "Hi, Jens from Chicago." So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, my first experience with the music, like before actually acquiring this CD, was of course excerpts from the songs were on the Yes Years video, and we also had the QPR show on VHS, and they played "And You and I" and "Close to the Edge" on that. And then later, like I eventually got the "Close to the Edge" CD in, I want to say 2005, and I was just really I'd probably heard like the Keys to Ascension version as well, Keys to Ascension 2 or whatever. But
so you were like 11? No, right? In 2005?
Yeah, well, it would have been earlier in that year, I think. So I think I would have been 10, and then later that year I turned 11. But yeah, and of course Siberian Khatru was also on keys. But yeah, listening to the studio versions was kind of a trip because, you know, Close to the Edge was so good, and like you can feel how different it is from much of the live versions. But then you get to, and this was something I experienced with much of the studio versions of songs I was so used to hearing live versions of, but "And You and I" and Siberian Khatru felt a bit more like they hadn't fully grown, I guess. Like they were very much fully formed, but it was like you could feel that they're in a studio, and it's not, it doesn't have some of the bombasticness that like they'd add to the live versions of, especially "And You and I." You know, Alan would add like more stuff to that, and
right.
And yeah, it was just interesting hearing these different versions. And another one of the,
they're a completely different experience in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think this was my first time also hearing a studio version of the Yes cover of America, although here it was the single edit of it. But I don't think I noticed that it was shorter for some reason. And it also had like the single total mass retain. So I know it's been like a hot minute since you've listened to this stuff, but that single version of total mass retain, it begins with like the birds and stuff, and then it goes do 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 do, I get up.
Oh yeah,
and that goes into the total mass retain section, and sort of where that section ends as "I get up, I get down" starts, and it's such a weird edit, you know, like taking this long track and finding a
something to put on the radio.
Yeah, it's like this is not a radio album really, so it's like, yeah, it's quite something. And yeah, and you know, I think I also watched Symphonic Live and other videos as well before this, but yeah, that was my experience with this CD, and I'd play it over and over like I would with any other Yes album that was like a new acquisition for me, and it's just stuck with me for years, you know?
Yeah, yep. Monumental. So what's your favorite track?
Definitely Close to the Edge. You know, I'm very much an epics kind of guy. There might be a few exceptions on certain albums, but Close to the Edge, it begins with a bang, and it's just great all throughout, and it doesn't feel like a drag listening to it for 18 minutes.
Right.
It's like you're very engaged all throughout. It's just so epic. It takes you on a journey to like a higher plane. I love it.
Totally. I agree. And it truly is mind expanding music, lyric sounds, and all of that. I was thinking earlier, either while I was playing it on the other show or maybe right after. Yeah, I think it was right after, before I called you or texted you, and I was thinking I would love to hear a CD that only had the vocals from each of the songs on this album, just a cappella. I would love to hear a mix of just the vocals. They were so young, and with the like ba ba da, in Close to the Edge, and then in Siberian Khatru, ba 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 da da da. It just to hear the vocals isolated would be killer. Would be great.
Yeah, I think if there was one fault I'd point out with Close to the Edge, it's
Oh,
that...
you're gonna get hate mail now, but go for it.
No, I mean, I'm like really reaching, and this is something I didn't really think about until like before this show, but I would say, there are the counter vocals like against what Jon's singing, like during the I Get Up, I Get Down section, and in And You and I as well. And, you can read the lyrics to what's being sung, but what Jon's not singing, but it's just so hard to like hear them clearly, like if you're just listening.
I like that. I think it makes it a puzzle. We've really got to play it back, pay attention, and listen through what you don't want to hear to figure it out. I kind of like that. I think it's neat.
Okay. Oh, and on the Yes Source YouTube channel, there are versions of Close to the Edge where you do hear, I think it might be Steve singing in her White Lace section, like you can hear it clearly. And,
yeah, because his voice is out front in that live as well. Joe Cass has joined us. Joe Cass says, it's not perfectly isolated, but there is something on YouTube of vocals. Oh, so maybe that's what Stephen was referring to. Okay, cool. So Joe, I don't know if you saw my show earlier, but if you happen to comment on it after seeing it, be gentle. The audio is horrible. I actually was telling Steve earlier I was using the wrong camera. I use iPads, and the ones in blue right there are the older ones. I had a different one of those downstairs. I should have been using this newer one back there. Another story, a little side note. The audio is horrible, but I think I played pretty well through most of the 3 songs. So, Steve, what do you think of the tracking order? Now, that's an odd question for an album that has 3 songs, and one of them's a whole side long, but I think it's worth asking.
Yeah, I feel like I'm split about it, because there was this one book that sort of made me consider this, and I agreed with. I think it was called Music of Yes, Structure and Vision in Progressive Rock. And the author of that mentioned that the tracking order, like starting with Close to the Edge and then doing And You and I and ending with Siberian Khatru, I think the metaphor that was used was, it's as if a mountain has brought forth a mouse. And it was like such an odd comparison. But I love Siberian Khatru, but I totally get what he meant, because Siberian Khatru, like the way the album is ordered, it does go from my favorite track to my least favorite track. It gets a little bit less epic along the way, but still good. And it's like, I totally get why in some instances Yes played the album in reverse order, because it flows well. But at the same time, I really love how it just begins with a bang, so it's like I'm kind of torn. What about you?
I'm gonna answer it with a simple question. What could one possibly listen to after Close to the Edge? Really, you got to let your brain breathe after that. It's like, most people might not be like this, but when I go to a concert, I don't want to listen to music for a couple days, let alone the ride home. Like, I know a lot of people listen to the band all the way there, listen to the band all the way home. That's like eating on the way to dinner and eating on the way back. It's like, it is. But to bring it back, what do you there's nothing to listen to after Close to the Edge. So I'd much prefer that it opened with Siberian Khatru, which is a great, the way that sharp, cutting, knifey guitar sound. Dan, dan, chicka, down, chicka, down, dan, chicka, down, down, down. You know, it just cuts right in. Blah! It also starts with a bang. And then And You and I is this grandiose thing. What could you possibly hear after that? Oh, just flip the record over. We've got something for you. And then the birds and the breeze and the water and the tree leaves. It just, to me, that's the perfect order. I mean, how'd they fuck that up? You know, really, really, it's so obvious. That's my answer.
Yeah, so I guess we're in agreement that Close to the Edge sucks. No, I'm kidding. No, but those are good points. Like, I can understand why they might have decided, like, it's best to open with a bang and just keep people wanting more. But then after that, it's like, how do you follow that up, you know? So it's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was the task with Tales from Topographic Oceans. What the fuck do you do after the Close to the Edge album? And when a journalist said, what are they going to do next? Put music to the Bible. And Jon said, that's what we're going to do. And then that came out. And what do you do after that? And you get Relayer. And after that, some great music, but it's been a whole different world, because those 3 albums, what do you do after that? You don't do that ever again. You don't do those 3 albums ever again. There's nothing left in that bucket, and that's fine. I'm happy with the buckets that came out. That's a whole other discussion. Okay, so how different might it have been had Bill Bruford left before the recording and they'd gotten Alan White earlier? I think the answer to that's simple, but I'll hand it to you first.
Okay, so I think it would have been at least slightly different, because, you know, it very much was, like we said, Jon and Steve knew what they were doing, and everyone knew how to play, obviously, but it felt very much like Jon and Steve were trying to drive it, and then the others would add their stuff, and each person's contribution is important, obviously, but I do think there would have been at least a slight difference. I mean, we've heard how differently Alan and Bill's drumming styles are.
Or Bill and anybody's, for that matter.
Right. So I don't know how involved Alan would have been in the writing, but the playing at least would have been different. But I mean, you're the drummer, so like, what do you think?
I'm going to answer this one with a question too. Not to be rude, but not just to you, but to everybody. And here's my question. Ready?
Right.
Have you heard Yes songs?
Yeah.
I think that's what he would have played. And I forget how interestingly odd a lot of Bill's parts are on the album, because I'm so used to decades of the live versions that when I do go back on the rare occasion and listen to the studio album, it's like, Bill, there's no other drummer that sounds like Bill Bruford, period. And he also thinks quite differently, and I think there's a reflection of that between the way the two played the song. I honestly think that Alan's playing a bit more, and I don't mean to minimize what he's doing on it, but more obvious parts for those parts of the songs, whereas this article, I'm going to send you the magazine because I want you to have both magazines. I told you I was finishing the Robert Fripp interview, and he's saying how he never wrote he kind of wrote for a specific drummer or any other musician in the band, but expected them to know what they should play. And Bill Bruford's even quoted as saying, it's as if we're supposed to know what he wants us to play. And Robert Fripp's answer to that is, if I have to tell someone what to play, what are we playing together for? So I hear that in Bill's contribution. No one told him to do that. That's his interpretation of what goes here. No one else would have thought of what he's playing, because the part where he's just on the hi-hat during the beginning guitar solo, and he's going, I think that Alan would have blazed through it the way I played it today to the live version. So I really believe that you would have got what we have on Yes songs. And it's not like Alan had months to figure out, and okay, here's what I'm going to play. He had 3 days. So I think it's a great example of what spontaneously very well could have happened in the studio when he was introduced to the music for the first time. Just possibly, well, it would have been his first time for that tour because, like I said, the album hadn't come out. So I think that's really, I don't think there's a better example of us answering a question like that other than this situation because of all those timeline circumstances and the difference in their drumming.
Yeah, and Joe Cass, once again, drummer of Total Macertain Yes Tribute Band, says that was one thing very impressive about the Jon Anderson and Paul Green Rock Academy recent shows.
Yes.
The young gent nailed the Bruford version.
Totally. Totally.
And I also see that Nick Zales, or Zales, sorry if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, says least favorite song, ? I assume that's in reference to when I said Siberian Khatru, and then says, after that, play Gates, Revealing Signs of God, the list is endless. Yeah, just a very expansive catalog, have.
Thanks, Nick. Awesome.
Yeah, and I know that I remember hearing that one of the people they considered to replace Bill, like, after the album was Phil Collins, so it's interesting. It's interesting to think about how different like things will have been, not just for Yes, but also for Genesis. Like, what the hell would they have done without Phil? Once Peter left,
and who would have been the drummer if Phil did not stay in both bands? And how interesting! I forgot about that fact. Yeah, interesting.
Right. So I guess that brings us to the next question. Should the interior artwork with the cliffs and the water, should that have been the cover of this?
I think the easy answer is yes. No pun intended. But I love the surprise. This is such a plain cover, and then you open it up and there's the title of the album and the song. And you just get lost in this gatefold. I think to see it wrap around and have to open it that other way, I think it's like, I remember unwrapping the cellophane and going, oh my God, and what's going on in that little cottage on the island, and there's a boat, and what's with this path, what's holding it up, and there's like, you just get lost in this, and I love the surprise element. But what do you think? And fans, what do you think? But Steve, what do you think?
Well, I do prefer how the inner artwork looks, because, the front is just green and the logo. I still think I'm in agreement with you, because it very much feels like the green cover is... I compare it to, like, the song itself. Like, the green cover is the birds and nature sounds. It's very unassuming, very natural. And then you open it and it's like... the music crashing down, taking you close to the edge type of thing.
Yes, but let me tell you how smart your father is, okay? Okay. So, here's a missed opportunity that they could have done for the last probably 30 plus, maybe 40 years. If I was in charge, whether this being released as the vinyl with the gatefold today as a reissue, or with the CD, with the booklet, a missed opportunity is just like the greeting cards when you open it and it goes, they should have had the birds and all that on a loop so that when you open it and you see this, you hear the water and the birds. That'd be so easy to do.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That's how smart your father is.
Yeah, and on the topic of reissues, you've just reminded me, like, earlier this year, like, one of Roger Dean's Q&As, I think it gave me the impression that maybe there would be, like, some sort of box set or something coming out. But then later in the year, Steve Howe said that there aren't really any plans for a reissue. So it's kind of odd. Like, I don't know, like, what's up, but...
and along with my idea, the reissue... this could be more of a 3D hologram.
Oh, yeah.
And as you kind of move and, the mist is moving and I think I'm going to call somebody.
Now that's a missed opportunity.
Next question is, and folks, chime in with these answers too. So what's your favorite live version of any of these songs, or if you want to cite all of them?
Yeah, so for And You and I, it's really tough because many of them are excellent, whether it be like, some of the 70s performances where it begins with the...
There's the... bum, 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 bum.
Yeah, like that gets... Like, that's nostalgia right there. But I also like how they do it more straightforward, beginning with just a guitar part in other later live versions, Yeah. So I don't know if I have one absolute favorite version of And You and I. For Siberian Khatru, it's definitely the Keys to Ascension version, because I have very fond memories of getting the extended versions CD, which was like a compressed version of that, and it started off with that version of Siberian Khatru, and it's just, talk about a really strong way to start a concert. It's just so good as a concert starter, and therefore it could have been good as an album starter.
So quick question.
Yeah, what?
As a concert starter, which prelude to it do you like better?
Firebird Suite.
Yeah, thank you. Firebird Suite or...
is it Young Person's Guide to Orchestra?
Yeah, yes. I knew what they were. I just couldn't. I misquoted myself on the show earlier today. I said the major senior moment. I said Close Encounters, but
from the Tornado tour.
Yes.
Oh yeah, it was Close Encounters on the
that's what
Tornado
I
tour.
thought. Okay,
Yeah.
Which one do you like better?
Well, the Close Encounters is pretty good for that tour, because fits the theme, like arriving UFO and stuff like that. I'm very much a classics guy, I think, so I prefer Firebird Suite. It's just more epic, more sweeping, and just dovetails into Siberian Khatru much better overall, I think.
Yeah, I think for me too. As much as I love the other, I think for me too. Okay, your favorite version of Close to the Edge? I think I know. Oh, I do know. Oh, I know. But go ahead, tell everybody.
Yeah, well, I think we've talked about this on the show before, but my favorite live version of Close to the Edge by anyone is the ABWH version. It's, there's just something about the pace of it, and Bill Bruford adds a like at the start, and it's just so epic. And Rick is more indulgent with the like adding more stuff to that, like elongating it.
Yeah, he goes higher, more octaves.
Like, yeah, and it's...
I love Steve's musical interpretations, by the way.
Yeah. And it's just, it's just epic, and like... but for versions that have been played by Yes, I think it's probably the Yes songs version, or maybe any of the other versions from a Close to the Edge tour that were on that Progeny box set several years back. It's just, the band is so energetic. The song is very fresh. They've just come off of making it for the first time, and they're all really into it. You see Alan smiling as he's playing. It's just like the Yes songs version is just so good,
It is. I think for me, I'll do it in backwards order. Close to the Edge, I really love the Keys version. That's the version.
I know that.
Yeah, that's the version I know inside out, every note, every nuance of every instrument. I just love that version. For Siberian Khatru, it's a cross between what I played today, which is the live at the Richfield Coliseum in Cleveland in 1978, the Tornado tour, or the Keys version. It's tough between those two, and they're so much alike. I can't choose between those two. Those are my favorite version, and for And You and I, it's the Keys version. Okay. Even though, like you said, the Yes Songs version of all three of those is so nostalgic, but musically and performance-wise, those are just the ones that I prefer.
Okay, yeah, because. Yeah, I was going to ask, what is it about the Keys version of Close to the Edge that really stands out to you? Because sometimes I'm kind of surprised about that. So
Really?
yeah, for
So
whatever reason.
yeah, so it's how can I explain it? There's first of all, I love the drum sound is awesome.
Okay.
But there's certain articulations going on between Chris and Alan that are just so give it more punch. These offbeats, just these little dance moves within the normal framework of the song that we know that they're both hitting on, and it just helps to stitch all this craziness together. And I love Rick's solo in it.
Okay.
The vocals are great. I guess for all reasons, I really like that version. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's fair.
And it's a better recording with newer technology, for a
Right.
live recording. There's all these little things. Yeah.
Okay. So, how would you say Close to the Edge stacks up against other prog rock albums that came out around the same time?
I know my answer is almost a platitude, but it, it really it takes the cake. It sets the bar. It's above all of those and anything that has come out since, I think. I know that's you can argue that whether it's Dream Theater, whether it's Sound Chaser, whether it's Tales, but it was the biggest pivot in popular music and prog music, certainly out of anything that's come out since. I really believe that. Wow, if I scroll back up and look at that list of albums, I mean, oh my gosh, Islands is a great album. Thick as a Brick was monumental. Not my favorite Epic by Jethro Tull. Actually, Passion Play is one of my favorite albums to listen to.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, it's obviously Obscured by Clouds is a great album. I loved What's on Trilogy, the Enigma, and just there's so much great music on that. Gentle Giants album is great. Octopus that came out later, great album, great album. And of course you've got Uriah
Foxtrot.
Heep is what's that?
Foxtrot.
Yeah, Foxtrot. I mean, Foxtrot and Nursery Crime are both monumental albums. And I'm not as familiar with the Uriah Heep stuff, and it doesn't resonate with me as much. But as good as all those albums are, then you stack Close to the Edge on top of all of that. I'm sorry. As huge of a Genesis fan I am and of that era, I still think that I was going to say there's something, but I'll tell you what it is. The something that is different about Close to the Edge that kind of raises it above everything besides all the musicianship and all that one could argue is the production and the sound of it. No other album sounds like that before, during, or since. And to me, that's kind of the breakthrough the ribbon factor, if you will. I hope I don't sound like I'm overstating it or something, but it's just so different. It really is. Put it on next to any of those albums, anybody. Put it on. Listen to any four of those albums with Close to the Edge, either second or third, and just listen to the contrast of just how fucking nuts it is, musician-wise,
Yeah.
vocal-wise, and production-wise. The mix, the math, everything.
Yeah, because these are pretty good albums, but
They're pretty good. They're pretty good. They're all awesome. But I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
yeah, I know. But and I mean, it's probably like, people like it might be such an easy answer just because I've grown up listening to Yes more than any of these other albums. But I really do think Close to the Edge does have that it factor that some of these others don't have. Like Close to the Edge takes me to another like specific kind of world, and like there is a lot of great experimentation on these other albums, but yeah, Close to the Edge is just at the top of these for me.
And you mentioned something when you said that it factor. There's one other thing that I didn't mention in my positive tirade when I did list the its that I identified. The other it not identified, you can't identify, and it's that intangible, can't really explain, but it's there. And it makes it clearly different, whatever that is. Notice how I'm editing my language a little bit more these days.
Right. So should we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
All right. So, this is uses of the music in other media. So, you might vaguely remember this. There was like some independent like sci-fi horror movie called Apollo 18, like about a decade ago or something. It was like a found footage thing, and there's a moment where the astronauts are, one of them's listening to a cassette tape, and it's Andy and I. It's like, I listened hard but could not see. And then I think at the end of the movie, there's the opening guitar bit before the credits. There's like, dun 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 dun, and it's so odd because where it's placed makes it feel like a haunting melody after all the horrific things.
Oh, wow. Totally opposite of what the song really is.
Yeah, it's just so
How
weird.
Interesting. Now, that's a musical director for that film who really did some out-of-the-box thinking, to use it in that way.
Right. And as for Siberian Khatru, I remember several years ago, like back in my freshman year of college, I had to look this up again. It was mentioned in a book by Kim Stanley Robinson, a sci-fi author whom I actually met at a talk he did over at UC Irvine. He had this novel called The Gold Coast, which came out in 1995, and he mentions, like in the text, it mentions, I think one of the characters is listening to the Yes Songs version of Siberian Khatru because it mentions the Firebird Suite. And
wow.
Yeah, and at that point in 95, there was no other official recording of Siberian Khatru with the Firebird Suite. Like, this was pre-Keys to Ascension,
Yeah, interesting. That's a neat little trivia fact.
Yeah, I remember when I saw him at his talk, he said he was excited about going to see Steve Howe play with Yes later that year. I think it might have been the Yes 50 tour, if I remember correctly. I'll look it up as we talk about this other stuff. But the next question is, how would people react if this album came out for the first time today? And there's like a couple different ways you could look at it. You could think about it like everything else is exactly the same except for Close to the Edge having come out, or you could look at it as as the stuff that Close to the Edge influenced didn't come out because like that didn't come out. So you could look at it both ways if you want.
I think if I just look at it as it came out and without any of the other influential considerations of what it influenced, that's hard to answer because, as I mentioned on the other show earlier today, I said it was ahead of its time when it came out, and it would be ahead of its time today, but I don't know how people would respond or react to it. That's how I feel about it. I think there's other people that could feel the same. Please chime in if you agree, disagree, indifferent, whatever. But how would people react if it came out today? I think it would bend their brains at least as much. Maybe even more, because since then, music has gotten more written and produced into more digestible for the masses. So if this were to come out, it'd be like, talk about a fly in the ointment, it'd be like a dragonfly in the Jello. It would just, that's
Yum.
Caramelized. So I think it would just most people would not be able to relate to it. I think less people would be able to relate to it now than when it came out. Because when it came out and we look at all the other music that was coming out, that's just what was happening. That was the environment. Whereas now, it would just be too out there for people. I think what you see on the cover of Fragile is prophetic for the answer to your question, that the planet would just fracture. People would know how to what do you think? And fans, what do you think? But Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah, so before I answer, I looked it up, and when I met Kim Stanley Robinson, it was actually ahead of the Topographic Drama tour in 2016. Yeah, that was a great tour. But I mean, Yes 50 was as well, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, my answer, I feel like, I mean, like you said, what's at the forefront for audiences today is different from back then. You know, rock was very much the main thing, so it was a bit easier for Close to the Edge to get in people's like peripheral vision type of thing.
Plus everything was more long form and artistic and outside the lines, and there was all that, you know.
Yeah, and like music on the radio today is very different. There's more pop and some other genres. Like there's still some like rock, maybe indie rock, but it's not quite like it was back then. So I think Close to the Edge would be even more of a niche thing today probably, but the people who do listen to it would still have their minds blown. But it's like, you know, it would just be like this sort of weird fringe thing that's like not as popular, like sort of overshadowed by a lot of stuff because a lot has come out since the 70s.
Yeah, and here's one more little tidbit for context to that. I remember 79 through about 1981-ish. I remember, so there was a LA radio station called K-West, KWST, and it was not nearly as popular as KMET and KLOS, which were right next door to each other, 94.7 and 95.5. K-West was way on the other side of the dial, 102.7 or 105, something like that. I remember quite frequently hearing the Revealing Science of God or the Ancient on that station in its entirety, sometimes twice within a week. So that's how different radio and music listening and people's brains, for that matter, have changed since then.
Yeah. I see a comment from David Frazier saying musical masterpiece in a league of its own. Yeah, it definitely is.
Absolutely. Ask Rosie O'Donnell. Oh, wait, that's a different league.
Right. So we've probably already like answered this, but what's the legacy of this album?
It's everything we said from the beginning of the show till now. The legacy is that I don't think anything will ever bump its status. I think it's that galvanized into its status of the prog album that raised the bar that no one will reach. I know it's subjective. I know that. But I think most people, musicians, music fans alike, would agree that it's just so up there and out there that it's untouchable. I really believe it is. Even with, as much as I love Tales and Relayer, I just think Close to the Edge is the biggest spark that happened in prog rock then and since. Well, how about you?
Yeah, well, real quick, Angelina Christina said #flies in the Vaseline. I think that was in reference to the Dragonfly thing.
Is that on the Drum Talk TV page?
Yeah, also says, I listen to classics mostly. And Dan said, brain matter, haha.
Nice. Thanks, Angelina.
So my answer, as I remember what the question is, so the legacy of Close to the Edge, I definitely agree that, you know, for me personally, it's my third favorite Yes album. You know, Tales is at the top, and then
I thought you were going to say Open Your Eyes.
No, so it's Tales at the top, and then Relayer second, and then Close to the Edge is third. But overall, I think most people, most Yes fans at least, would probably have no problems at all with Close to the Edge, and a lot of them will probably say it's their favorite. And some people, whether they're huge hardcore prog rock fans or whether they're a bit more mainstream, might say that Yes peaked with Close to the Edge, and that was the highest that they ever climbed, and it's sort of a capstone type of thing. It's very it really stands out. I think it's definitely the most iconic out of maybe all of their discography, even
I
maybe even
agree.
more so than like I know 90125 was a hit and Fragile as well,
For
and it has
totally
like
different
an
reasons.
iconic. Yeah, but like there's something about Close to the Edge I think stands above those for many people, you know.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Yes have not played the material from this album very often. No, I'm kidding. They've played the songs on many tours. They're playing it now in Japan
And that
even.
says a lot. 50 years later and all along the way. That says a lot about how relevant the music still is, and even more so that there's still an audience for it. And I love that, obviously I'm your dad, you're my son. We're a generation apart and we feel so much the same way. There's so many other music fans your age that I'm sure feel the same way. Mention your friend's reaction when you first played them Close to the Edge, who's about your age. And how old were you when
Yeah,
this happened?
yeah. I'm not sure if this is the same instance you're thinking of, but I have a friend who's maybe a year older than me, and she and I were, I think, heading to or from college back in 2015, I want to say. So she would have been 22, and I would have been 20, 20 to 21.
Yeah.
So I was like, could I play one song? And she was like, sure. And so I played Close to the Edge. And I think when we got to I Get Up, I Get Down, she was like, this is like 3 songs in one. And I'm like, yeah, it's actually 4 in one. We're like not done yet type of thing. So yeah, and I also have a friend from Wales, whom I met while studying abroad in England. He said that, like he loved Close to the Edge, and he asked me like, what should I listen to next if I want to like experience something like Close to the Edge again? Like he was just so excited, and I think I had him listen to Tales after that because I was like, you know what? He loves Close to the Edge. He's ready for this, you know.
That's awesome. Gateway drug for sure.
Yeah. As for charts information, this info came from one of our listeners, Carl Coppage, who looked it up in a Billboard magazine that was on Google Books, I believe. So
And
thanks for
this info, brace yourselves, folks, if you really know this music. I think this chart stuff, is very impressive. And again, it speaks to the times of where people's heads were at in music. Not everybody, of course, but enough for this to happen. Let it rip. Let's unpack it.
Yeah, so Close to the Edge was on the top 100 charts for 25 weeks between October 7th, 1972 and March 24th, 1973.
So do you think that would happen now when you ask about how would people react? Do you think that would be possible now? I say nay.
Yeah, definitely not on like the mainstream like Billboard chart. Maybe on like a niche prog rock chart, but definitely not like Billboard.
Yeah.
Apparently it was on the top 10 for 7 weeks, top 40 for 15 weeks.
That's crazy.
And yeah, the week of November 18th, the album was number 7 and had been number 7 the previous week. It peaked at number 3 on December 2nd. And also apparently on that same day, And You and I was number 54 on the singles chart.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I have a bit more on my phone. Let me just see a screenshot of this. So other prog albums on the charts when Close to the Edge was in the top 10 include Days of Future Past, the Moody Blues album. It was number 3 that week due to the very belated hit status of Nights in White Satin. This album was from 1967, so that's pretty bizarre. ELP's Trilogy was number 21 after peaking at number 16 a few weeks earlier. Jethro Tull's Living in the Past was number 34, and it would peak at number 3 in a few weeks. And Thick as a Brick was 55 after being on the chart for 27 weeks. That's actually really impressive.
Yeah, so some of this stuff was doing this, They were all hovering and weaving around within each other, which again says a lot about the music scene at the time.
Yeah, and just 2 more. Moody Blues' Seventh Sojourn was number 69 on the chart, and then Carl writes, drumroll please, Fragile was still on the chart at number 172 after 44 weeks.
Wow, that's cool. That's impressive.
Yeah, and now we have some comments from people.
Yeah, I'll start with that. Let's start with Daniel Caporal, I believe it is. He says, I would flip the album over and over again. Yes, at its very best. I was 12 years old. My older high school friends turned me on to this album. Very cool.
Yeah, and I just saw a comment from Sulman Mariko saying Siberian Khatru, so I wonder if that's Sulman's favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, so back to the comments we're reading on this doc. Steven Snovak says, it's the first piece of popular music in which I heard and recognized a shift to the relative major. Hey, Yesshift, how about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a great music theory note there. Again, no pun intended. And Terry Schwartzwalder says, one of the greatest prog albums ever written. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Frank Grail says, I'm working on my own tribute on my 12-string guitar. I can't play Siberian Khatru, but I'm good at And You and I and play parts of Close to the Edge.
That's awesome. Great.
I'd like to see that tribute whenever you put that out.
Yeah, message it to us. Bill Folo says, all-time favorite. I love everything about it. I think Eddie did an amazing job. I was 15 when it came out and didn't know of it until the next year when a great friend took me to my first Yes show. Wow, I was hooked big time. So that would have been, Tales would have been your first show. Interesting. Wow, what a way to dive into a band with a four-sided album of 4 songs and then seeing it performed live with Close to the Edge and then Roundabout. That was the whole concert. I have that bootleg on tape, like reel-to-reel tape up there.
And Daryl Budd says, I consider it their absolute peak / masterpiece. They made great records before and after, but for me, Close to the Edge is sheer perfection, in my humble opinion.
Yep. Alan Ziegler says, I really hadn't thought about Yes until I heard Roundabout. I went to the record store and bought Close to the Edge, thinking Roundabout was on the album. When I played side 1, I was completely blown away. I think I let the turntable replay about 4 times before I turned the record over. I love it. My buddy got us tickets for the Yes Songs tour, and I became a fanatic for life. First of all, let me chime in. So far, I love that there's some guys even older than I am that are chiming in on this stuff. Guys in their 60s plus. Good on you. That's great. Thank you for following what we're doing. And to the younger folks as well.
Yeah, and Jim Adam Watts says, a perfect album.
That's great. Ian Barnett says, a true 5-star album, remarkable. Composition, arrangement, playing, vocals, all outstanding. Yes, doing only what they can do and doing it superbly. Their masterpiece. Very well put.
Yeah, and Nick from earlier says, in those ancient days of Yes, it puts ancient in quotes, I guess reference to the song, The Ancient.
Good reference.
Yeah, one had to get up and flip the album over to play the other side. It was work, but hardy Yes souls are always up for the challenge.
Absolutely. And then Mark Michalko says, can you imagine my first Yes shows of 10? Yes would play classic to start that first. Oh, would play this classic to start that first. So that was the first song, Close to the Edge, and the whole album, and play it straight through. Still ranked the greatest of my 10, which includes a second row show on June 21st of 1979. That would be the second leg of the Tormato tour. That one ranks number 2. Very nice. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks, everybody. And I want to give a comment. You probably have been told this by me, but when I was, I'm going to say 17, so in like 1980, I guess, my mom, your grandma, was going to a friend's house and asked me if she could borrow this album to take to her friend's house. Yeah. And I think it was around that time I discovered my parents smoked pot. There you go. And at the time, so my mom would have been let me think. In 70, what I say, 1980. Oh, she would have been 40.
Okay, but yeah, getting back to what Mark said,
Yeah.
and Mark shared a little photo in like
Oh
a
yeah, let me
comment.
call that up. Sorry.
Yeah, and that was from the Tales show in Philly, and what they did was they actually played Close to the Edge in reverse order on that tour. And
Right, right.
yeah, and what's funny is the Philadelphia 79 show that he went to was just so happened to be the filmed like live in Philadelphia in 1979 show.
That's so cool. I said to
Yeah.
Stephen when I opened up this picture before we started the show, I said, I wonder what John's pretending to play right there.
Yeah. And I see a comment from Douglas Reed saying, I know a lot of live albums were overdubbed. How much was used on the Yes Songs album?
None. It wasn't done back then.
Okay.
I stand by that.
All right. Yeah. I don't know. So I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, that wasn't done till I want to say the 80s, I think. I really don't think it was done before then. I don't think it was done until getting into the 80s. And why, I have no idea. I mean, you can either hack your own music or not, you know? I just don't see a purpose for it. It's a live album. What are your closing words on this monumental milestone of 50 years of such a celebrated, one of the most celebrated albums ever? Definitely for prog rock, number one, but period.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, before I say my closing words, David Frazier adds, I'm actually 63 and used to listen to it on my record player in my bedroom where I grew up, early 70s.
Same here, yeah.
Yeah, nice memories there.
Yeah.
So my closing words on Close to the Edge, there's really no perfect way to put closing words to it. It's just so, it goes on, like this music will go on forever. It just transcends our reality. I know that sounds like very hippy dippy and whatever, but
no,
like,
you're
like no offense or anything, but it's just so good, you know?
It is. I agree with everything you just said. And I did forget to mention, it was wonderful to see it played with a full orchestra with the band on the symphonic tour. Tom Brislin was excellent. Tom, you know I love your playing. It really would have been nice to have Rick be part of that. But Tom did a great job. It was really wonderful to hear that music with a full orchestra. It really was.
Yeah, and like I've mentioned before, I'm glad it was Tom on the filmed show so we could see like what he could do. You know?
Yeah.
But you just reminded me of something that back in 1993 there was that symphonic music of Yes album, and they had an abbreviated version of Close to the Edge. I was like 5 minutes.
You can't abbreviate an epic. You can't.
Yeah, like I know Steve and Bill were involved and John was on the song, but yeah, it's like, how do you abbreviate that? It's like listening to it,
I could never
weird.
agree to that. I'd say this is the piece of music. You either get it like this and do something with it, or you leave it as is. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. I don't. I'm sorry. Let me jump in. I'm sorry. I feel the same way about Thick as a Brick on the Bursting Out live album. I love that. It was the first version I heard. And then when I heard the whole album, I thought, why did they leave all this other great stuff out? I just am not into that. I don't want to hear it just part of Supper's Ready. I want to hear Supper's fucking Ready. And speaking of which, Enja just texted me and said, you have a hungry wife. But I just, I don't like that kind of stuff. I don't want to hear just part of the revealing science of God into just part of the remembering. I'm not a fan of that at all. That's just I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's not for me.
Right. It's
wait. Like cutting out that section of Roundabout. What's up with that? It's the same thing. That'd be like cutting out of Starship Trooper. Don't fuck with the music.
Yeah, it's like that abbreviated symphonic version is even weirder than like the single of a Total Master Tane single, you know?
Yeah, at least that's a full section they took out and put over here
Yeah.
rather than some mishmash. Get the machete out and just cut this thing down randomly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, symphonic music of Yes is nice music to put on in the background while you're like having dinner or something maybe, but the symphonic live version, like the full version in concert, it's just like they nailed it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Folks, thanks for joining us. Go put on the album. I'm going to dance to it while I'm cooking dinner right now for my wife. We're celebrating her birthday month.
Yeah, and get the 50th anniversary
Get the 50th.
t-shirts.
Yeah, Stephen surprised me with this. Came in the mail specifically for this show and the show I did on Drum Talk TV earlier. If you haven't seen it, go to Drum Talk TV on Facebook and you'll see me play those 3 songs. The audio sucks. The playing's kind of good. Check it out. Have some fun. Sing along. And thanks for following what we do. Our next show is on
September 14th.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific.
With Mike Tiano as our guest, a longtime contributor to Notes from the Edge. I can't wait to see what Mike's up to.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. And we'll also talk a bit about the Close to the Edge tour, which, like the original one, which he got to see.
That's right. I was going to say, we'll definitely touch on this milestone of this great album with Mike.
Yeah. And yeah, people can find the audio of this on various podcast platforms. You can see which ones they are at anchor.fm/Yesshift. And if you want, you can click the support button there and donate whatever you want. And we go live on facebook.com/Yesshift. So just follow the Facebook page and you'll see updates of what we're up to. And you can also find the videos on YouTube. Just search Yesshift and it'll be easy to find us.
Yep. And you can write us comments, questions, suggestions. We do take fan suggestions. We've created a few shows from those. We are at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. The dot is lowercase. Look forward to our next show together. And thank you so much for following what we do. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and everyone enjoy listening to Close to the Edge again on its there's also like a listening party on the 13th. Let me just pull it up real quick. So over on the Yes Official Facebook page, there's Close to the Edge listening party on Twitter at 8 p.m. UK time, so that would be noon Pacific for us. For Tim Burgess's Twitter listening party. So yeah, I guess find Tim on Twitter, and I'm sure the Yes Official Facebook page will also post about it. And yeah, definitely not the last time we're listening to this monumental album. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.